Okay. So, what I want to talk about today in the time that I have is some of the main things that happened during Jefferson and Madison, the next president, between 1801 to 1817, and how it became rather difficult for a president who said, I want to keep the government small, the president's authority limited, taxes low, not get involved in foreign wars. Throughout American history, American presidents have been elected and say, I'm going to respect the rights of the state. I'm going to respect the role of my office and keep it limited. And as soon as they have the power of the presidency, if they can, they expand it. And not just George Bush, but Barack Obama, William Jefferson Clinton, Ronald Reagan, Abraham Lincoln. Every president has taken office saying, I'm going to keep things simple, limited, focused. Then they take office and they do whatever the Constitution allows them to do. Because the Constitution doesn't potentially foresee every single thing a president has to deal with. And unless the Constitution says you can't do that, presidents tend to just say, I'm going to do it. And if you don't like it, you can sue me in court. And then we'll go to the Supreme Court. So, Thomas Jefferson on the left, James Madison on the right, the first big Republican presidents that established much of the way the country was run for the next few generations until the birth of the new Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln, but that's a few weeks away. So when Jefferson first took office, and I'm hoping you all have this stuff in front of you, because I'm going to talk a little fast, he did exactly what he said he was going to do in his speech. He talked the talk of everybody as a friend. I have no political enemies. I want you to support me because I have no political enemies. And what he said in his speech were the goals of the Republican administration. I want to reduce the size of government. The Federalists expanded the size of the military, the size of the government. They raised taxes. I'm going the opposite direction because government has to be for the people, which means low taxes, low expenses. I'm going to shrink the size of the Army and Navy. Why? Because A, they cost a lot of money, which means taxes. B, if you have an Army and a Navy, you're going to need them to fight wars, and I don't want to fight wars because we have an ocean between us and Europe. I don't want to get involved with their business. I want to trade with everybody peacefully. Plus, wars cost money. So, all the new taxes, like the whiskey tax that the Federalists created that caused all that trouble, I'm getting rid of them. We don't need them because I'm getting rid of them. I'm shrinking the Army, shrinking the Navy, shrinking the size of the government. The particular trading relationship that the Federalists wanted with Britain that was special, limited, and kept other nations out, he said, I'm getting rid of that too. Free trade with everybody. And I'm not going to shut down the press. I'm not going to, in any way, be intolerant of religion. This is a new era. The Federalists are gone. This is real democracy in practice, just like his speech said. Here's the problem. You can give a speech, but then there's reality. For instance, Justice John Marshall was appointed by Federalist president, right? He strongly believed in a big, strong national government. The complete opposite of President Jefferson. And Jefferson couldn't get rid of Chief Justice Marshall because he was appointed Chief Justice constitutionally. You can't fire him. That's a lifetime appointment. So Jefferson, right from the moment he took office, with the Supreme Court that was acting as the check and balance of the three branches of government, said, yeah, I don't really like anything that you're doing. And two particular cases came out of the Supreme Court that specifically limited the roles of the president, that expanded the role of the national government in a way that Jefferson really didn't want. For instance, in 1803, the Supreme Court, in a case called Marbury v. Madison, made it simple, and it said, Congress can pass all the laws that it wants, and the president can sign all the laws that it wants. But if the Supreme Court says those laws are unconstitutional, end of story. So Chief Justice John Marshall essentially elevated himself to be the co-equal of the president, saying, you can sign all the crazy laws you want, but if my group says they're unconstitutional, end of story. Go back to the drawing board. Fletcher v. Peck said the Supreme Court, when it makes a decision, if a law is passed in one of the states and somebody doesn't like it and they sue, if it goes up to the Supreme Court, what the Supreme Court says, the state has to respect. The power of the national government is reinforced by these two laws, especially the power of the national government in the Supreme Court. Jefferson wasn't crazy about this, but he couldn't fire Marshall. The other thing that happened, which ruined Jefferson's ability to shrink the size of government, to shrink taxes, to shrink the role of the presidency, is opportunity. Is opportunity. When France was defeated in the 7 Years' War, it transferred a big chunk of land to Spain. Spain then quietly gave this land back to France. And by a big chunk of land, I mean this, the Louisiana Purchase. This whole territory from the mouth of the Mississippi River all through the West and the Midwest right up to Canada. This was explored by the French, settled by the French, and then transferred to the Spanish, given back to the French. Jefferson bought the Louisiana territory from France in 1803. Why? France was at war, they needed the money. So they said to Jefferson, do you want this land right next door to the United States? And Jefferson, remember, he wants to expand Americans westward to become farmers. He said, yeah, I'll buy it for, I don't know what it was, $20 million at the time. Here's the thing. According to Jefferson's theory of presidencies, you only do what the Constitution says the president can do. You do not expand it. There's nothing in the Constitution that says the president could buy half a continent or a third of the continent. Jefferson just said, well, it doesn't say I can't do it. So unless somebody sues me, I'm going to buy it because it's for the good of the country. Yes, but Mr. President, you just finished telling us that you want to shrink the power of the presidency, shrink the power of the national government. You just doubled the size of the U.S. territory with the sign of a pen and $20 million, which, you know, we can easily afford. So hypocrisy is sort of the other thing that got into Jefferson's way in terms of shrinking the size of the government is the fact that Americans want to engage in free trade, right? Which means your ships sail all over the world, right? There are such things as pirates that will attack your shipping if they think they can get away with it. America at the time had a very small navy. It was not respected, unlike the British Navy, the French Navy, etc., the Russian Navy. American shipping along the Barbary coast of North Africa, here's Europe, Britain is up there, France, Spain, this is North Africa. So the Barbary coast of North Africa was like the coast of Somalia today, rife with piracy. And American shipping would be attacked repeatedly because the governments of these countries really had no interest in reining in piracy. So Jefferson had to go to war with these states in what's known as do I have it written down? The Barbary coast is North Africa. The Barbary Wars is what, in 1801 to 1804, he went to war with these coasts, these cities and towns in the coast of North Africa in order to secure the safety of American shipping. But if you are bringing the American Navy and its Marines across the Atlantic to fight in the Mediterranean Sea and the North African coast, that costs money, taxes, And you can't shrink the Navy and the Marines if you're using them for overseas conflict, right? So that idea of shrinking costs, shrinking the military, that was thrown out the window because of crisis. And then you got sucked into the European wars anyway. Britain and France have been at war for years now. Jefferson doesn't want to get involved with either side. He just wants to trade with either side or be left alone by either side. What's the problem? The problem is, by 1806, both sides are interfering with American shipping, and he's getting upset. To make it even worse, the British are not just interfering with American shipping, they're kidnapping American sailors and making them serve in the British Navy. So Jefferson, this belief in free trade doesn't work if foreigners don't respect your Navy, your trade. Go ahead.
Both sides are interfering what?
Both sides are interfering with American trade, and the British are actually kidnapping American sailors. So Jefferson believes in free trade, everybody gets along, everybody trades, but his shipping is being attacked by the English and the French because they're at war and they're looking for any kind of funding, any kind of supplies. So Jefferson in 1807 passes an embargo. He says, if the British and the French are interfering with American shipping, I, the President, am forbidding all American trade with Britain and France. We're going to punish them. Now, it wasn't a very good idea because the American economy needed to trade with Britain and France. They didn't need to trade with us. So this embargo, it hurt American economic interests. It didn't hurt the English and the French. But this is the more important point. This presidential limiting of American trade with Britain and France was an incredible expansion of presidential power, which Jefferson said he was never going to do. But he was forced into it because he felt he had to punish the British and the French for interfering with American trade. By 1810, because it completely ruined the American economy, he said, okay, well, but I think it's Madison at this point. It's rescinded. It's gotten rid of. But in 1812, America goes to war with Britain in the War of 1812. Another massive expansion of presidential authority and cost and taxes. Again, because of the crisis/opportunities of wars happening overseas. So what happened? The British are still attacking American shipping. The French, by this point, have got more problems on their plate. They don't care about America anymore. But the British are still attacking American shipping. They're still taking American sailors. Now the new president, James Madison, he restarts the embargo, cuts off all trade with Britain. And the Americans are now getting upset. They feel like their role as an independent nation is not being respected by Britain. And so now there's talk of war. Not just ending trade with Britain, but war to teach them a lesson. And the folks in Congress that wanted war, Henry Clay of Kentucky, they wanted war with Britain because they basically wanted the British to get out of American interests. There were still British agents in the West that were interfering with American expansion, and he wanted the West totally opened up and free of all British interference. John Calhoun of South Carolina, a slave state, strong believer in free trade. And Britain was interfering with America's trade overseas. Now, these guys also wanted Canada. Native Americans, that's the one I wanted to bring up. In the West, the British agents were supporting Native Americans in resistance to American expansion westward. And the Americans were fed up. Britain was the cause of all their problems. They were riling up the Native Americans. They were interfering with westward expansion. They were interfering with overseas trade. Time for war. The war divided the country because Southerners and Westerners were all for it. But Northerners that had the most economic relations with Britain had no interest in going to war with Britain. In the North, where you had all the industry, the banks, and the overseas relations with Britain, those folks said, why are we going to war with Britain? They're basically, we are their best customer and vice versa. We have no reason to go to war with them. Southerners and Westerners said enough is enough. So the war came. And what was problematic about it is that the Northerners refused to really help fund the war. So there was a lot of animosity there, a lot of bitterness there. By the end of the war, we win. But what are the major consequences of this war? In a nutshell, the land east of the Mississippi River was completely conquered. Native Americans allied to the British were defeated. White expansion westward now is like a flood because Native American allies of the British have been defeated. The whites now expand, and that caused a whole other bunch of problems. But the other thing that happened, the Federalist Party disappeared. Because they refused to support the War of 1812, they were deemed unpatriotic. And in this country, if you don't support the country in a war, your political chances disappear to nothing. So after the War of 1812, which ended, confusingly enough, in 1815, the War of 1812 actually lasts until 1815, the Federalist Party is unpopular. Nobody wants to be known as a Federalist because that means you're unpatriotic. So from 1815 onwards, less and less people run on the Federalist ticket and vote for Federalists to the point that everybody is now a Republican. America becomes a one-party state by the end of the 18-teens because of all this. So what's the takeaway from this little lecture? You read the inaugural speech of Jefferson, who said, I love everybody, low taxes, no wars. What did he do when he got into office? He punished his political enemies. He expanded the size of the federal government. He expanded the military. He got involved in wars. Why? Opportunity and crisis have to be reached, and the national government's responsibility is to deal with these crises, regardless of what you said when you got elected. So thank you. I will put this recording up online this evening. And please